Good evening and welcome to the June 21st, 2021 City Council meeting in the City of Connersville. We'll be led to the Pledge of Allegiance by Councilman Tommy Jr.
Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Good evening.
Good evening.
Let's pray. Father, we thank you tonight for your presence in our life. We thank you for taking us through a tough year. We don't know what's ahead, but we know that you do, and that's why we need you, and we ask you to intervene for us with your watchful eye and your ear that is attent to your people. We thank you for this council tonight, for the matters at hand, that you'll help them to deal with it with integrity and character, and that things will go well in the right direction for our community. We just thank you for their service in Jesus' name. Amen.
Amen. Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
Thank you for the prayers for my father.
Thank you, Eric.
Okay, I'd like to welcome everyone and remind you to please turn your cell phones off or your ringers off. And we will begin with roll call.
Councilwoman Phillips. Councilman Robb.
Here.
Councilman Gray.
Here.
Councilman Nettie.
Present.
Councilman Warner.
Here.
Councilman Barrett. Councilman Williams Jr.
Present.
Okay, again, I'll remind everyone we are doing the virtual meeting. We have an ordinance to look at tonight that meets state law, but right now we have the capability of doing it this way right now. So it is going to be a little slower process just because there's kind of a lag. And so we do everything by roll call vote just because we have the virtual meeting. So there is a lag here. Sometimes I forget and I get a little antsy. So just be patient, work with us. So if I stop the meeting so we can hear, that's why. And also when we have someone speaking, only the person at the podium speaks. If someone from the audience has something to say, then you can come to the podium afterward. That's Robert's Rule of Order, plus it allows our councilman on camera to be able to hear what is going on being said. Okay, everyone has the minutes of the June 7th, 2021 regular meeting. Are there any additions and corrections to that?
There's a correction we have.
Yes, sir.
When you asked for advertisement for a full-time ordinance enforcer, I voted no on that.
There was one no and.
What page?
Second, it says Mayor Frank requests permission.
You're gonna have to give me the page number at the top of your sheet, because I can't, 1, 2, and 3 is not, I have a continuous book.
It's 377.
3777.
Yeah.
Okay.
Sorry, I didn't realize you were looking at a different book.
Well, all the books have the page numbers. It's not a page.
That's the only thing I have.
Okay. Are there any other additions or corrections? No, I'll entertain a motion to approve the minutes with the addition or the correction from Clarence.
Motion.
We have a motion,
Second.
a second. All in favor, signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed, same sign. Okay, motion carried. Thank you.
That was not a roll call vote.
Oh, my goodness. My first one. We need to do a roll call vote. I apologize. See, I get ahead of myself, and that's what I do.
Councilman Robb.
Yes.
Councilman Gray.
Yes.
Councilman Nettie.
Yes.
Councilman Warner.
Roll call for what? Approval of the,
Minutes.
yes.
Councilman Williams Jr.
Yes.
Gonna get that. Thank you. Okay, move on down to new business. We have pending ordinance 3653. That's the zoning ordinance change. We have some people here to speak on that. We will open the floor up to you. Bill, you want to start?
Yep.
I saw you out there
Yes.
walking up, so.
Yeah. I heard my name and my ears were burning. I'll So this ordinance for the zoning code change with confined feeding operation. Of course, you received a favorable recommendation from the Area Plan Commission. And the only thing that they actually ended up changing is that they made it a required special exception rather than a use by right. So that's the only change. The commissioners voted to adopt the code amendment as it was recommended by the Area Plan Commission. And so main thing I just want to let you know is then there's three options that the city council has. Number one is you can approve the recommendation as written, as certified and forwarded. Number two, the council can actually then amend, and they can also reject. Now, one thing that the city council would have to do if you either amend or reject is you will have to provide to the Area Plan Commission the rationale and the reasoning why. So if there would be, there would be a series of amendments. I would recommend that each one be voted on separately, because that way the Area Plan Commission then can react separately to each of the recommendation, each of the proposed amendments on your part.
Okay.
So if there's any questions any of the actual city council members have for me, of course, Brian was involved with this all the way from the start.
This might be a question for Jeff, but I know the city is in the county.
Correct.
So we all live by the ordinances and rules adopted by the county. So why a special one for the city if the chances of us having a CAFO in the city is pretty limited?
Well, the chances of you having a CAFO in the city is not kind of limited, it's impossible. Under the old ordinance and under the new ordinance, it's not possible. But you're still, you're an entity of the Area Planning Commission, so you're a legislative body, because the Indiana Code just essentially expresses the legislative body. Here we're unique in the fact that we have two legislative bodies. I would add there's a fourth option. I would not encourage you guys to do it, but essentially if you sat idle and just did nothing with this, then in effect it is an approval.
Yeah.
So that is a fourth option. I would not.
Yeah, it's essentially what you have. It's the 90 days, and it's the opposite of a pocket veto. But yeah, so those are your options. I don't know if there's any questions, any of the board.
But very clear, I do want that to be clear. Under the old one and under the new one, neither one will actually impact city limits whatsoever.
And I think some of you have been around long enough that, for example, when something's primarily affecting the city, and with whether it's code amendments, I've always tried to get the city before then. We have the public meeting with the commissioners, and vice versa. So if it's primarily going to affect one of the entities, I always try to get the action on their part first.
Thank you.
And that's why we had to wait until this evening for all of you to actually have the opportunity to vote and ask questions.
All right, thank you.
So, if anybody else has any questions for me at the moment? In case, I will take my seat.
Thank you. Thanks. Don't trip.
Yeah, I know, that happens. Yeah, I know, that was your turn.
Okay, anyone else? Come on up, sir. State your name. I am out of it tonight. State your name and address, please.
John Bills, 140 Wells Drive, Springboro, Ohio. Actually, I'm really here speaking on behalf of my father, Mark Bills, who's a resident in the county here. First off, just want to say thank you for the opportunity to come and speak. I do appreciate that. I handed out a packet, or Jeff helped hand out a packet a little bit earlier, the presentation that I'll run through. Mr. Nutty, you asked the same question I was curious about when we were leading up to this, just how that kind of worked, because I'm aware with the ordinance the same that a CFO can't be put, or a CAFO can't be put within the city limits. I have the presentation. This is what I presented to the APC, and I'm going to run through the same information. Some of it, may not be as meaningful within the city limits, but there are a few things that I do at least want to make sure council understands of what the ordinance could change and how it might impact some of the residents within the city limits and some of the potential new businesses. So I'll run through it, and forgive me if some of it you read or when I go through it, you are like, well, this doesn't really mean anything for us here tonight. So, the first thing, just have the agenda there in that second page, kind of why are we here, the benefits of what some people, myself, believe the benefits were of the current ordinance, and then just talk a little bit about the changes of the ordinance, what that does for residents, whether, city and in particular the residents in the county. So why are we here? The current ordinance was adopted back in 2011. I'm not sure, it would have gone through, I'm assuming, the same process before, so if anybody's been on council that long, you were probably a part of it back then as well. Since 2011, there had only been one application go through the process. I can't speak to how many other people inquired about going through the process and didn't do it. I'm sure Bill could answer that question, if there's just been an abundance of people and they just couldn't meet the requirements, and that's kind of what led to it. But currently there's only one that's gone, applied for it, and it's still in the process under the old ordinance. It hasn't been denied yet. County staff has noted, the old system had a point system, and I'll talk a little bit more about that, but a lot of thought went into that back then. They talk about how many meetings and how long that went on. There was a big collective group that came together, both residents and public officials, that came together to draft that back then. At the time, they felt it was needed to kind of protect both groups of citizens, people that wanted to build them as well as the current residents. And trying to make sure everybody kind of stayed on the same level playing field with each other. Some of the things I wanted to point out, the benefits of the current ordinance, the big thing, I believe it was well thought out. It was a fair balance of the rights of the applicant and the residents of Fayette County that could be negatively impacted. And, there's benefits to them. You hear about the business, what it can draw and all that, and that's important for all communities. But there are also, you got to weigh that with just the negative impact to the residents that live in and around it, and what that can do to their water rights, air rights, all of the different factors that come into play with it. So benefits of the current point system that is in place, and I understand, it's been talked about, and I don't envy Bill, he's been working through that other one. It is a complicated system with that. Complicated isn't always bad, but it can make it more cumbersome. Some of the positives that I hate to see go away with it, I can understand wanting to streamline that, but there were positives about the point system, and one of the big ones in there, which I'll get into in this slide, is it benefited the applicant to go above and beyond the minimum standards. Whether that was, you've got setbacks about how far they have to be away from a resident or from a business or from a church or from a school, and the system was built that if their farm allowed them to, and they put it further away, instead of going the minimum, they added another 500 feet, they got more points for it. If they did additional odor management practices, you could put trees in around the building, you could put in additives into the feed to make manure smell less bad, you could do different manure applications, all those things that they did, they got extra credit for it, basically, and if you got enough extra credit points, it actually could become a not by right, but you wouldn't have to go to a public hearing if you could earn enough of those credits. If you had to earn at least enough of the credits to at least get to go to the public hearing. So, the good thing about that, which the new one, does away with, it was a way to compromise. It was a way for both the Area Planning Commission or BZA, whatever process it was in along the way, current residents and them, to try to compromise and to try to make it as less impactful as possible. So that was one of the benefits out of the old system. One of the negatives, it was a little bit complicated, but it did try to help propose some compromises and some things that they could do to benefit the neighbors and make it, less negative for them. Protecting the Fayette County's current residents, the proposed new ordinances drastically reduces the current protection of residents. The first one on there actually was fixed at the APC, no right to be notified of a public hearing. That was one of them. This was the presentation from there, so I'm grateful that they added that in, and the county commissioners approved it as well that way. I think that is important to give everybody a voice to let them something for this impactful. So that first bullet point was taken action on and has made it in through so far. The next one on here, no local water protection. You know, this has in particular to do with the well water, and we'll talk a little bit about that. I'm not familiar with the exact routing of public water within the city. If every resident and every person within city limits and businesses all have public water, if the infrastructure is in place for that. But if you do have residents that are out on the outskirts or out that they don't have public water yet, this could come into play there. So we'll talk a little bit more about that one. And then the new ordinance does allow for the CAFOs, the CFOs, to be closer to homes, closer to the schools, closer to churches, closer to parks, and closer to Connersville than what it was previously allowed. So we'll talk a little bit about that too. And the big thing is this new one has no provision in it encouraging to exceed the minimum. Basically, they can come in with just the bare minimum, and there's nothing to even encourage them or to try to get them, like if they're able to move it further away or if they're able to do something else, there's nothing here trying to encourage them to do that. So, you know, that's a disappointment in the new one compared to the old ordinance. So the protection of the water availability, you know, and this could be impactful if there are any of those residents. I know a lot of cities, even though they may have a good water system, it hasn't made it all the way out to all of the outskirts. So when you get out on the outside of town, some of them may still have well water. So this one would come into play on that. Current ordinance requires a professional study to be completed by the applicant. And it needs to be done by, they call it a professional study. It's supposed to be done by a hydrologist or a geologist that specializes in water management. And it clearly states the current ordinance, not the new one, but or the proposed one, but the current one, they have to have that study done by one of those professionals where they can certify that the water that's going to be used by that barn and by the raising of the livestock won't negatively impact the quality or the quantity of the water of the surrounding neighbors. And to me, you know, that's one of the biggest things that I'm worried about this new one. You know, they talked about it and they said, well, the APC could still require them to do it, but it's no longer required. So if whoever happens to be on the board at that time doesn't decide to do it, it's not required any longer for it. And part of the discussion that took place throughout that kind of process where they were kicking around this was there's discussion that is all monitored at the state level, and why would a county or a city in this case need to get involved with the water quality or the water quantity. And I actually had the chance, and it's been talked about in the other meetings now, was able to speak with Mark Bash up at DNR, which is who regulates water quality for these CAFOs. When they go in, it's between IDEM and DNR that they manage the water quality for them. However, they don't, prior to the construction of one of these barns, there is no testing, there is nothing that has to be done for water quantity. All they do is, after it's built, if they call it and it's in here, a significant groundwater withdrawal facility, which means they pull over 100,000 gallons per day, they have to register that. And that is still very good. I'm not taking anything away from that, but they register it. It's not a testing has to be done to verify there is 100,000 gallons per day. It is, they register it, and then if the facility, whether it's a hog barn or pumping water for something, for anything, if they're pumping more than that and they do damage it, the state will step in at that point. DNR will step in and work with both the person causing the problem and the neighbors to try to resolve it. But it is fixing a problem that's already happened. It's not like a proactive approach. It's fixing it afterwards, but they will try to step in. Part of the problem is a lot of these CAFOs, they use like just under that. They may use 70, 80, 90,000 gallons. In talking with Mark Bash about that, he says there is no protection from the state at that level. Ultimately, and again, no permitting, there's no tests being required to be done. If they put it in, it becomes a civil suit between two residents about the water usage, and it basically gets tied up in court, and you can prosecute or sue your neighbor in order to say, hey, you dried up our family well, we don't have water now for whatever you were using for your family, for your kids, for your own farm. It could be a smaller one, but there is not that protection. So that's a concern, should be a concern for any resident within the county that is on a well, and especially there are aquifers within the county that are plentiful, but there are also a lot of aquifers where the data says there is not enough groundwater to support one of these. So without having that protection in and without having something, I'm not saying it shouldn't be allowed, but there's really no reason not to do the test ahead of time and to require them. they're the one that stand to gain profit and to gain from putting these in. And the reality is, it's to nobody's benefit if they build one and then their water's not there. All it's gonna do is cause a problem for them and neighbors at that point. So they gotta drill a well at some point anyways for these. Why not do it proactively and require them to do it? So that's one of the bigger concerns that we have. And like I said, I can't speak specifically because I don't know the whole infrastructure, but if you do have residents that are on the outskirts of town, that could become problematic for them if there's not 100% city water within the city limits. So something you should at least consider. You'll know your residents, and if there's any still well producers that are getting anything other than city water. But that is a critical problem with the new one. The next one on here, and I'll apologize for the next slide, it presents well on TV, but it does not show up here very well with the black text, so I'm going to kind of read down through there. But the setbacks, and I want to hone in on obviously the one around Connersville we're going to talk about, but the current ordinance does not, so the middle column's current and then what the new proposed one is. So the minimum distance to the resident under the current ordinance is 1,620 feet. Under the new ordinance, it can be 1/4 mile or 1,320 feet. So they've shortened that distance to where they can now build it closer to a resident and they can't do anything about it. The minimum distance to a public use area, to a park or to anything for public use, it was 1 mile. It's now gone down to 1/4 mile or 1,320 feet. The same with a school or a church. It used to have to be over, or it'd be 1 mile, a minimum of 1 mile. Again, they could get points for going more than that. Now, they only have to be 1/4 mile or 1,320 feet. And this is an important separation distance to Connersville. So the old ordinance did not allow a CAFO or CFO within 1 mile of the city of Connersville. Under the new ordinance, it allows it to be within 1/4 mile or 1,320 feet. At the previous meetings, there were a couple people that stood and said, well, it doesn't really matter that we're changing it from 1 mile to 1/4 mile because there's houses around, on the outskirts of town that would keep it from being closer than 1 mile anyways. My answer to that is, if there is, then why not leave it at 1 mile? If you're saying it's not benefiting anything, why wouldn't you just leave it at the mile? Because I went through and looked at, some of the zoning maps and started to look, especially as you go north out of town, there are areas out there that are still within the city limits, but they are rural in nature. And I could see spots where, again, I didn't have a surveyor go out and check it, but it looks like there are places where you could put them that are with less than 1 mile, but would still be 1/4 mile away from Connersville or from another residence. So again, I haven't fact checked that completely. You guys would know your city better, but again, if it was 1 mile before, they're saying there's really no need to put it closer because residents would stop it. I'd say, why don't we just leave it at the mile? I can't see the benefit in changing that one. The other piece I would say is if that wasn't changed, a big part of what the sales pitch for this all along has been to help grow commerce, to bring in industry, to bring in things to help the economics of the community. And I am all for helping grow the economics of the community. My question for you is the same, for the city. You can't put one of these barns within the city limits, but you do have all of your areas on the outskirts of town where I would hope you want some new industry to come in or some new commercial business, or I don't know how you feel about new residential business, but new residentials that are coming in on the outsides of town. And ask yourself, do you think it would be more likely for a business to want to set up shop or a new factory or a new industry if there's a barn 1/4 mile away or 1 mile away? You can smell them whether they're, especially if it's to the west and the wind's blowing, you can smell them at 1 mile away. At 1/4 mile, it would likely be unbearable when the wind's blowing it directly at you. So think about, as you're thinking about wanting businesses to expand and to grow within here, which one's going to have a chance to bring in more revenue for the city and help the city grow. Again, I would really consider that 1/4 versus mile for the proposed for the city on that. It goes on down through some other ones. Again, these don't really impact you. They took away the restrictions of all the little burgs, I don't know what they're, hamlets, I think they were called within the old ordinance. So now it was 1 mile from all those. It can now be 1/4 mile within all of those. So again, they lost out on their protection, and it's even more so than Connersville because they are more sporadic when you get out in the rural by those. So there's a better chance that it could come closer, or at least it doesn't preclude it from coming closer with these. Same way with a rural subdivision. By the zoning code, it had to be a mile before. It can now be a quarter mile from a rural subdivision. And the last one doesn't really impact this. It was just, and that one's really hard to read as it gets further down the page, but it was minimum road frontage. They used to have 500 feet, and they dropped it down to 150 or 75, depending on whether it's A1 or A2. So, it comes back to, what's changed in the last 10 years that's requiring these reduction in setbacks? What happened over the last year that now a CAFO should be able to be a quarter mile from Connersville as opposed to a mile from Connersville? And I still have never really heard an answer to what's driving these reductions and where they should or could be within the county. So with that, I think that was kind of the end, but those are kind of the couple in the water one, if there is anybody that doesn't have city water, and then obviously the mile versus quarter mile close to Connersville, I think are probably the two that's the most pertinent and could impact the residents within your city limits that you should consider. Thank you for letting me talk. I'd be happy to answer any questions.
I'm gonna let everyone speak and then council will have an opportunity.
Awesome. Thank you so much. I appreciate it.
Thank you. Anyone else?
Okay, you wanna go ahead? We'll have a fight.
No, my goodness, absolutely not.
Hi, I'm Viv Heimlich, 7597 West, 800 North, everybody knows me here. Got a call before the APC meeting, a few hours before saying, they're changing those CAFO ordinances to a quarter mile. You really need to go to the Miller Building and talk about it. So I did some really quick research, about an hour's worth of research, and I spoke about it. And sadly, it was passed. Then I was given about an hour heads up on the commissioners meeting. I'm really in tune here with my family. And so I ran over there and gave a short presentation. Since then, I decided to do some research, and I did all kinds of research on the internet. And one of the things is that we all believe in Indiana's right to farm. And we have legislation of Indiana right to farm. Senator Lysing was very, very much a part of that. But we also have rights as a family, as homeowners, as a right to enjoy your property. I have a CAFO that's 1 mile from my home. It's actually on the Rush-Fayette County line, and it's Ripburgers that has that. And there are days that you don't want to be in my house, you don't want to be around my house, but it's a mile away and it doesn't affect me that much. A quarter mile distance is a whole nother situation. A quarter mile is like 4 city blocks. So from 3rd Street to 7th Street, that's a quarter mile. So just to put it in perspective, you hear about all these feet, 1,300 odd feet, but that's 4 city blocks, is about an average quarter mile. There's over 10 million hogs in CAFOs in Indiana. We are actually number 6 in hog production in the United States. So I thought that was kind of interesting. A CAFO is considered 600 hogs or more is considered a CAFO. So I guess if you have 500 hogs, it's not considered a CAFO. I'm not sure the legality of that, but I did read that. Not only does this bring possibility of a 10,000 hog operation within a quarter mile of my home, quarter mile of a lot of people's homes. The gentleman here talked about State Road 1 North. I got to thinking about that just yesterday. If you go on up north before you get to the cemetery on the west side of the road, you may have a CAFO in there. Wouldn't that be wonderful? Everybody coming down to Connersville to smell that. So it's not only the odors and hogs. I got this article from Hoosier Environmental Council stemming the tide of pollution from CAFOs. It says that not only is there water problems, but the air pollution problems. Several people in Hendricks County has sued, Bartholomew County has sued. They almost always lose because the legislation of Indiana's right to farm supersedes their rights as homeowners. Says here that livestock generate as much untreated urine and feces as produced by 87 million people, or 14 times the human population of Indiana. Livestock waste does not have to be treated. It is minimally controlled and rarely monitored, causing to contaminate water bodies, and it can happen in a variety of ways. The Mississinawa River was, had 4.5 million gallons of untreated animal waste. The farmer put it on his fields, then he didn't end up putting a crop in. All washed down in the Mississinawa River, caused a fish kills for thousands of fish. Then closer to us, in June of 2016, 30 gallons of dairy waste was dumped in the Little Flat Rock River. Little Flat Rock actually starts up there in Posey Township and goes over into Rush County. And it was at Milroy when this happened, and it stopped Greensburg from having to close their water facility from surface water intake. He mentioned about wells. I believe in a discussion I had with David a long time ago, a lot of water, in fact, most of the water from Connorsville is from wells in our aquifers. So we've got water contamination, and we certainly have air contamination. This one lady, I felt so sorry for her. She's in Bartholomew County. She had a 4,400 hog operation that was put in within a half mile of her home, not a quarter mile, but a half mile. She's reported headaches, closure of sinuses, can't get her breath, almost sounds like COVID, noxious smells, it caused respiratory illnesses. There's a picture of her house here, it's covered with flies, and she's a half mile away. I'm going to leave these off with Rosemary, but it's the hydrogen sulfide is a neurotoxin and can cause brain and nervous system problems, skin rashes, seizures, and comas, and ammonia is also a health risk from these facilities. So the more I research, the worse it got. I'm going to give all this to Rosemary, but do the right thing, guys. Thank you.
Thank you, Viv. Thank you, Viv.
Anyone else? Come on, sir.
Good evening, my name is Scott Jones. I'm an attorney in Cincinnati. John's my best friend, and I've gotten to know Mr. and Mrs. Bills over the course of my friendship with John, so I've been trying to help them and guide them through this process. I wanted to hit on just a couple of points that John brought up, and one is it's really about the minimums in the water study. I was asked at the last county commission meeting, you know, isn't it reasonable for someone to do a water study before they would put a CAFO in? Or isn't it reasonable for someone, if they have an opportunity to put a CAFO in 2 miles from a church, that they would do that as opposed to a quarter mile? And I will tell you, I've been practicing law for over 20 years, and if people acted reasonably, I wouldn't have a job. And Jeff, I think you probably agree with that. And what happens is when you have these minimums, that's what people end up doing, right? They just go for the minimums. That's the low-hanging fruit. And I think that's important here because if you look at the existing ordinance that we have right now, you have implicitly granted rights to landowners to water, right? You're basically saying you have an uninterrupted right to take the water that's necessary for you and your home operation. And if someone wants to come in and put a CAFO in, before they're able to do that, they have to produce a study that says that is not, the operation of the CAFO is not going to negatively affect the quality or quantity of the water of the surrounding neighborhoods, okay? So you've implicitly granted that right to those landowners. And one of the biggest changes that I see in this new ordinance is that is now reversed, okay? What you're saying now is the CAFO can come in regardless of how much water it's going to take. And if it becomes a problem, you're going to place the burden on the landowners to file a civil lawsuit to protect their right to water. And what happens in a situation like that is, if you think about it practically, is, you know, one, you notice the problem, right? Your well, you can't get any water out of it. So what do? You got to call IDEM, you got to find an attorney, attorney's got to file a lawsuit, you got to get in front of a judge, you're looking at some type of temporary restraining order, preliminary injunction to try to get access to water. Now, if you're farming at this point in time and you don't have access to water, what are your crops doing? Right? And so you're also putting that financial burden on the landowners. You know, I litigate cases for a living. This is what I do. I will tell you, it is the most inefficient, expensive process I've ever been involved in my entire life, without question. And I think that that is an unfair burden that you would be deciding that, hey, you know, it was important for our landowners to have access and rights to water in 2011, but in 2021, that's no longer the case. And we haven't seen any studies, anything to suggest that there is any rational basis to make that change. I would urge you to think about that, you know, before you make your decision. We passed out a report from Mundell and Associates, and this was a report that Mr. and Mrs. Bills had to pay for in the earlier proceedings with the DORA application. And I'm not going to read you the whole report, but if you look at the conclusions, one of the conclusions was that the operation of the proposed well it would be highly likely to reduce the amount of water that would be available for surrounding landowners, and that would particularly be the case in July and August. So again, you know, this report from Mr. Mundell, who is an expert in his area, is basically saying, you guys are going to have this problem, right? And the system now would again put the burden on the landowner to find an attorney, to file a lawsuit, to fight for the right to water. And this was a right that you guys have given to them for the last 10 years. That's all that I have. Happy to answer any questions later.
Anyone else? I can't think if anyone's out there. Anyone out there, Clint? Nope. Okay, open up for questions from council.
Jeff, you could answer this probably.
Sure.
It's being favorably recommended by the APC that we adopt this. What adverse actions to the county would there be if we did not accept this, if we rejected this?
Well, I believe it goes back, if you rejected it entirely, I think we have a pretty significant legal question, because we have, the Indiana Code says the legislative body, okay? And what is the legislative body? There's several arguments there. The cleanest way is for the two legislative bodies to be on the same page, no matter what that page is. If they're not, then we have an issue. So if you rejected it entirely, then I think it goes back to the APC and we have to have a discussion. And I have to do some research on whether or not what happens. If you were to approve it with changes or recommend changes to it and send it back to the APC, then I think they would go back to the APC. They would entertain those changes and then send it back to both legislative bodies. If you reject it, then I don't know. I know what I think the answer is, but I would have to do more research to be able to state that definitively and legally.
And the reason why I ask is, you know, I like to think I'm a guy with an open mind and like to look at all sides, but none of us can look at anything without any kind of prejudice because of our background.
Of course.
I have no agricultural background whatsoever. I grew up right on smack dab in the middle of the industrial part of the city, so I don't know anything or very little about agriculture. But I have been a drinking water operator since the mid-1980s. Still work for a drinking water system to this day. And on drinking water, especially with us having groundwater supply for Connersville, Everton, Milton, all around us, plus all the homes and the subdivisions outside the city, that is something that would concern me. Unfortunately, I am a little prejudiced in that area because that's what I know.
Bill, how close can the Capefield be to the city limits right now? I mean, I don't know how close they can
Well,
get.
right now it's 1 mile.
No, I mean, possibility, because I've seen the map of where they can be. It looks pretty small to me.
Yeah, there's Brian Durham was the one who mentioned that when you look at the map, is that about the 1 mile.
Even the quarter mile.
I mean, yeah, the quarter mile. As then as you look at the quarter mile, of course, extended with all the surrounding rural subdivisions. So I did not have the opportunity to, and the time, to take me relearning to use some of the tools on the WTH-GIS. I did not have a chance to actually run any type of analysis using the GIS as far as what type of difference it would make, and then what the location would be, and then sort of lay that over 1 mile from the city limits. So I really don't have a definitive answer.
What's the mile? I mean, an idea, how close, the current ordinance under a mile, what is it? I mean, how close can they be? I don't even know. Are they 2 miles away? Are they a mile away from the city limits?
Oh, what, the houses?
No, any KFO.
Okay, the nearest one is, okay, the ones that were approved is on 550, just north of Springersville. Those are the ones with Stuart Henry. And then out in Fairview Township, that is the one that was approved for Matt Wilhelm. And in the time we've been here, those are the 2 that were approved. The one that was rejected was actually southwest of town. And that was actually because the information was brought forward at the public hearing. That was turned down, and the motion that was made to turn it down was made by a farmer. Was that we have to be good neighbors too, if, therefore, it's an area that had seasonal drawdown, and his comment was that in this location, if we have a permanent drawdown, it would cause permanent property damage. So that was the reason, one of those 3. Now, the result of those with the very emotional hearings, and it's very subjective, everything, a lot of what was presented, that's what initiated the quest to try to rationalize the process. And so there are 2 things that were going around at the time. There was either setbacks and separation distances or the point system. Well, we attempted to, with the plan commission, was to merge the 2 together. That's how we ended up with what we have.
How close, I guess Springersville, how close are they to our wells?
Okay, that's on 550, and it's about 1.5 miles north of Springersville.
I don't know how far that is from our wells. Without looking at it, I don't know how far that would be from our wells. Is there any possibility they come closer to our wells?
To our Comstock wells? The one he's talking about is on east of Waterloo, what used to be Waterloo School.
Yeah.
Right, that's,
So that's,
So, not looking at the actual, the movement, maps showing the movement of water, I really can't answer that question. Mr. Wilhelm's is all the way on the other side of the county. So,
our aquifer runs right along the river. I forget how wide it is, Dave. You might remember that.
it varies.
Yeah, it does change, I know that.
But John, you can click on measure tool and you show 1,300 feet.
You can measure by miles too.
True. I just thought 1,300 easier to measure than 1/4 would be.
Oh, I see what you're doing, trying to set a perimeter.
Is that 1/4 mile? So if a CAFO was put at the end of that line, which is a 1/4 mile, you're sitting on top of the aquifer.
But a CAFO can't go there, is my point, right?
If it was in the
we
middle
probably
of
have
that-
right there, it's also a flood hazard area, so they wouldn't be able to put one in there due to the floodplain requirements.
And you're less than 1/4 from Shelton Platte there.
Right.
Yeah.
That's floodplain too.
And then we have another well field by the ballpark.
On south. Nothing,
Oop,
oh,
that's
too far, too far.
That ball field, yeah, right there. See the road? Right here. That road on the top of your screen goes to the wells. To the far right, that's their last
keep right.
well.
A little more.
Right there, that's their last well.
But just because there's a well there doesn't mean that the water can't be contaminated because of the aquifer is
Yeah,
much
'cause-
wider than the wells.
But, well, this is also related to, I think some of the city council members are familiar with my comments in the past about the things, since we're trying to revise the zoning code, is the adopting, okay, for example, the historic districts and then also the well protection districts as parts of the actual zoning codes, actually adopting those as, overlay districts.
Correct.
Yeah, so that could actually be done also as part of the zoning code to make it easier to do something with them, from my perspective, anybody, whether it's a house or anything else.
What was the real reason for them to shorten the distance instead of a mile?
Well, quite honestly, is that one of the plan commission members initiated the process. And I'm not going to mention the name because I don't want to appear like I'm throwing up someone.
Bill, in order to speak, you need to stand up at the
Okay.
podium, please, so
Okay, all right.
we have better.
Okay, all right. Now, it was initiated by one of the plan commission members. I started with providing also one of the options was to just starting with the existing ordinance with removing the point system and then everything else that had to do with the point system, anything else that wasn't directly related to the confined feeding operation. Now, the rationale in the mind of the actual, certain plan commission member, I really can't vouch one way or another what the actual reasons that decision was made. And
They actually went through several other communities and areas, and they started looking at the distances that were on the books on those things, and ours were considerably larger and stuff. But for my point, I didn't understand either as far as what, particularly why we had to shorten the distance as far as that goes.
Was just considerable.
Yeah, other than that was it.
Yeah.
And for my part, I didn't know one way or the other on it, but as far as, but that was kind of what.
Yeah. So so that's how we got from there to here.
The point system, as Bill says, what we were after, trying to just streamline it a little bit as far as the part of it goes. The rest of it got
Yeah.
kind of roped into the.
Yeah. So my idea for the starting point was just dealing with everything else with the separation distance as is. Then what do you do as far as then making the changes of those, any separation distances? Do you try to find anything else that's in the point system that you could actually add as within the actual ordinance? So that was the discussions on the part of the area plan commission members, and I provided my input, and as I'm just strictly the staff and it's strictly advisory, it isn't me that actually makes the decisions on what ends up in an ordinance. Unfortunately, at times I've probably pushed too hard at certain times, and so in the past I probably have exceeded my role at times in the past.
Okay. But it's been a great source of information, Bill, so don't put yourself out of that as far as I.
Thank you, I appreciate that, Brian.
No, that's true.
Any other questions by board members of me?
I'll add this. I think it's important to note, because the APC did a lot of work on this, so I don't want it to appear like it was just somebody that threw something out there. Our current, and I think that if you guys have some issues with it, and I think that makes sense from the city perspective, I will tell you that if you leave it as the current confined feeding operation ordinance as it is, in my opinion, is about as close to a ban on these as you can get in your county. That is, in my opinion, the reason it was reviewed. That was, and you saw in the presentation that there's been one in the last 10 years that's pending right now. I don't think, to me, that means that it's a great ordinance. To me, that means it's a great ordinance if you don't want to have them. If you say we don't want to have any more, then it's a phenomenal ordinance. I think that's the reason for it. So just to kind of take up for the APC on why they pushed this and why they changed some things is I don't think they believe we should have a ban in the county. And the commissioners were very close, guys. This wasn't a slam dunk, okay. I mean, it's a tough decision, right? It's a tough decision, but I do think it's important for you guys to know that perspective, that the reason that this was reviewed is that the current one it is pretty close to a ban. I mean, you could almost change it to 3 words and say, we will not, or 4 words, we will not have CFOs. I mean, you could almost change it to that. So.
Well, I think along those lines, it was also recognized in the 2011 comprehensive plan, is recognized that there was a problem back then, because one of the recommendations also in that comprehensive plan was to review and amend the confined feeding operation, for the reason because it is as restrictive as it is.
Why was it considered, it's not a ban, but why is it close to a ban? What are the reasons for that?
The setbacks get a lot of attention. They do, and the setbacks, you guys have a strange community anyway because there's a lot of residential houses spread out throughout the county. Okay, so it's automatically not, if you change it to what it is now, I certainly don't want to guarantee anything, but this isn't going to be like you're just going to have them popping up everywhere. It's still a very, very difficult thing to have in place, even with a quarter mile. In my opinion, and I know that Mr. Bills disagrees, and he's an engineer, and he probably has a lot more knowledge on it than I do. One problem with the current ordinance is it guarantees, you have to hire an engineer to essentially guarantee and certify something regarding water impacts, right? And to me, I don't know, and Mr. Bills has, I don't know if he touched on it as much today, but he has talked about the fact that drilling a well could help do that. That's something that I think has discouraged anybody else from even applying, because it's difficult to get an engineer to say, if you do this, I can guarantee you that it won't impact anybody else ever, right? Because there's lots of things that could happen. We could have, there's all kinds of things that could happen that could change things. So that's one big hiccup. Setbacks are somewhat of a hiccup. I personally can't guarantee it up here, but I personally don't think that this changes a CFO's proximity to the city of Connersville or city limits at all. As you were kind of looking at the map, you could see, I mean, you guys were looking at one, and then way behind that, there's residential housing that would have been, you're not even getting close to that. So I don't think it changes the impact with the city as much. Certainly, it sounds like you guys are against maybe potentially having it a quarter mile from city limits. So I mean, that's certainly something you could change. That's the beauty of being a legislative body. You get to.
Well, that's why I asked if a quarter mile impacts the city. We just don't know the answer to that.
Okay, and did I include in the package to the Plan Commission members that one GIS map?
We don't have one.
We don't have it, no.
Okay, I thought I included
You
it.
did on the,
I think
Very
you did
originally.
Originally, I think it was there. The one you're talking about,
Where you
the
had
ones
red
with the bubbles.
dots.
Oh,
exactly.
yes,
Yeah,
that's,
with the red dots. Now, it's not as useful as if I would have had the opportunity to prepare the actual map, current map. But all that remains, as you see the dot, those are all dwellings. Didn't do any of the dwellings within the city, so every single one of those dots. And that is before the current GIS, so I had to hand map each of those. Then there's a quarter mile, that's the red circle. You see the wider black circle that's around it. That's the 300 feet for the amendment that was made by the county commissioners. Now, the series of the 1 mile setbacks, those will be the large red circles, the pink circles, and the blue circles. So if you just look at just really where the red circle is immediately around the yellow dot, that gives you an idea of potential locations where something could go to meet the setbacks. And as Mr. Bill is referring to, if you look at the hydrology report for Fayette County, there's a lot of areas, especially in the south part of Fayette County, that there's significant problems with dry wells. And I mean, just drive around the outside of Fayette County, you see all the pickup trucks with the water barrels on the back. So there's a lot of problems down there. But, I mean, I'm not involved in the business, so I can't say what type of probability of everything that they're actually going to look at. But there's a fair restriction on someone moving in and down there. Does it mean that there will be open house in Fayette County on confined feeding? Yeah, it's the, because I think when you look at those maps right there, there still doesn't massively increase the amount of area. It does in some places, but how much more desirable would it make Fayette County as far as potential locations and where they would be located? I really can't answer the question like that. I don't prognosticate. I would have won the lottery by now if I was.
Any other questions from council?
The only issue I have is this quarter mile. I don't think we should reduce that. I think we should stay the way it was.
Okay, is that from the city or the overall around the dwellings or what?
Overall. So I think a quarter mile is too close to your neighbor.
And again, I'm looking at water issues, but I don't know if
You and I
a
both.
mile might, I don't know, mile is too much. I don't know.
I think with the water issues too, I think that helps not harm your neighbor by opening it up to a mile. That's my opinion. I'm not a scientist to be able to do that. But seeing how the water is around here, and sometimes we do have water problems, and California and out west is a good example this year. We can't predict the weather. I just feel that we're trying to protect our neighbors if we open it back up to a mile, or leave it as it is, as a mile.
Any others? Well,
Now, if that is the interest with the motion, you'll need to actually then vote on, because the thing that needs to be voted on is what the plan commission has forwarded to you. So any motion such as with Councilor Werner, those would have to be amendments to what was presented here. And those are the ones that then the city council, if it does pass, would then have to vote on and then return it to the area plan commission. That of course is stating what the amendment is, and then the rationale and reasons, which is Councilor Warner's statement.
But the disadvantage here is, I know we've had copies of the ordinance for a time, and a map that was provided. The APC did quite a bit of work, went to the governing body, the commissioners, I assume, on the county. They probably didn't address it immediately, but then when we are asked to vote on it, this is the first time we've heard some of the information, but we have to decide right now.
Okay. Actually, you do not. There's 90 days. So it's actually the July, was it 22nd, I think was the hearing, I think? 22nd or the 26th.
Is the date, is
Yeah,
the due
the
date?
public hearing, yeah, when it's
Well,
certified.
it would have been July, so I'm not,
Yeah, so it would be sometime in July.
no, I'm saying it wasn't July. You said.
No, I'm saying it would be July. They have until having to make a decision.
I don't have that exact date in front of me
Yeah.
in the public hearing.
But it's 90 days from when it was certified.
I went and watched all the videos. You can we'll go back and watch all the videos
Yeah.
from the
Yeah.
from the APC and the commissioners, they're all online. I went back and watched them all, so.
So if you need
Information.
time to really mull things over, you don't need to make a decision this evening.
Yeah.
As long as we're certain of that, because what I don't want to have happen is we think we've got 2 more weeks and then it's automatically approved.
Yeah, because it was,
I don't want that.
yeah, like I said, is the, okay. All right, someone have I don't have my cell phone with me, have a calendar handy? Because we held that on a different day. I think that was so the regular public hearing was on the 4th Thursday of the month.
Bill, we got a calendar up.
Oh, beautiful, thank you.
That's June, end of June, 1st of July. Do you need them to go forward or backward?
Let's go backward to April. Because
Can't do that.
because one of those is the 22nd, the other one was the 26th. It was on a Tuesday, I believe. So, yeah, APC at Miller Building. So it was certified on April 26th. So you have 90 days from April 26th to make a decision.
So late in July then.
Yeah.
So we for sure could do this. You could think about it until the next meeting, the first meeting.
The first meeting in July on the 6th.
Yeah.
They give you a chance to go watch all the videos.
It's July 5th. Has that changed due to the holidays?
It's the 6th.
The first meeting in July will be July 6th.
So what do you need, a motion to hold it till the 6th?
Yes, if
If
that's what you want to
your
do.
question.
So moved.
I have a motion to hold the meeting, or the vote on the July 6th meeting.
Second.
I have a second.
Roll
We'll
call.
get Bill back up there, John. I want to make sure he heard that. Did you hear that, Bill?
Yeah.
I was talking softly, I apologize. We'll do a roll call vote.
Councilman Gray,
Yes.
Councilman Nettie,
Yes.
Councilman Warner,
Yes.
Councilman Williams Jr.,
Yes.
Councilman Rob.
Yes.
Okay.
And it's July 6th, correct?
July 6th,
Correct.
yes, sir.
And I think it's important. What's discussed right now, I'm not saying it's a public hearing, but certainly if members of the public would like to speak, you guys consider that, you'll consider that or not at that time.
We can. I don't know,
Anybody
what-
can speak
yeah.
during public forum, and they have a limit of 5 minutes. I mean,
I just want to make sure people know that and don't think that.
Yep. Okay,
thank you.
thank you.
Thanks, Bill.
Okay, well, see you in a few weeks.
All right.
Thanks, Bill.
Thank you, guys.
Thank you, gentlemen.
Thank you all for your time.
Thank you, everybody.
Thank you.
Appreciate it.
Thank you, Ms. Brown, for sending this stuff today.
Oh, you're welcome.
Have a good evening.
Thanks.
Safe travels.
Okay, move on to item B.
We'd like to take B, C, and D together.
Okay, we'll take B, C, and together.
Hey, Bill.
Hey, Bill,
Bill.
can you guys move up the hallway?
Safe travels.
Sorry.
We still got a meeting to hold.
Okay, all right.
Resolution 2021-50 is a resolution to reimburse $2,106 into park other contractual. Resolution 2021-51 is a resolution to reimburse $150 into the DOT garage and motor supplies. Resolution 2021-52 is a resolution to reimburse $449.98 into the police telephone.
Move that we approve the said resolutions.
Okay, we have a motion and a second. Roll call vote, please.
Councilman Nettie?
Yes.
Councilman Warner?
Yes.
Councilwoman Williams Jr.?
Yes.
Councilman Rob?
Yes.
Councilman Gray?
Yes.
I'm not the only one.
Contagious.
Yeah.
It is. Okay. Move on down to item E. We have the approval of resolution 21-53. Establishment of the electronic meetings policy. We've been talking about this. This is the policy from the State House, and AIM helped put this together. These are the requirements from the legislator. We cannot reduce these requirements. We can make them stricter if you'd like. So this is a sample resolution. When they sent us a sample resolution, we presented that. That has all the requirements in it. So it's really your pleasure if you want to accept this or if you want to change something. Obviously, we can't change what they have. We can go stricter.
I've read through it, I'm okay with it.
I would second that.
Did you have, wait, Dave, was you a motion?
Oh,
then?
yeah, sure.
Okay.
You agree.
We have a motion and a second. Roll call vote.
Councilman Warner,
Yes.
Councilman Williams Jr.,
Yes.
Councilman Rob,
Yes.
Councilman Gray,
Yes.
Councilman Nutty.
Yes.
Okay, thank you very much. And by the way we've been handling everything with Bill is per these guidelines, so that's why we can see him, hear him, and everything, so
Yeah.
it will continue that way. So we want to go ahead and be doing that already. Okay, on down to item F, approval resolution 2021-54, the opioid litigation. Jeff, you want to mention anything on that?
First, let me start with, it's pending litigation, so I don't want to go into too many details. Having said that, it's my strong recommendation that we do in fact opt out at this point in time. And it's also the recommendation of the attorneys that are handling this throughout most of the Midwest. It's their essentially recommendations as well. And I'll be happy to kind of go through it with you and update you on the litigation stance and things like that. I just individually think it would be better than on camera.
Okay. And a motion to approve?
Motion.
We have a motion?
Second.
Second, roll call vote.
Councilman Williams Jr.,
Yes.
Councilman Rob,
Yes.
Councilman Gray,
Yes.
Councilman Nutty,
Yes.
Councilman Warner.
Yes.
Okay. Thank you very much. Approval of pending ordinance 3677, fire transfer, Rosemary.
Pending ordinance 3677 is a transfer within the fire budget, moving $10,000 from other employees to other contractuals.
Motion to approve?
Second.
We have a motion and a second to approve on first reading. Roll call vote.
Councilman Rob,
Yes.
Councilman Gray,
Yes.
Councilman Nutty,
Yes.
Councilman Warner,
Yes.
Councilman Williams Jr.
Yes.
Okay, we have a motion to suspend the rules.
Motion.
We have a motion and a second.
Second.
Roll call vote, please.
Councilman Rob,
Yes.
Councilman Gray,
Yes.
Councilman Nutty,
Yes.
Councilman Warner,
Yes.
Councilman Williams Jr.
Yes.
And we have a motion for a third and final.
So moved.
We have a motion, did you second? I didn't hear you. Okay, motion and a second, roll call vote.
Councilman Gray,
Yes.
Councilman Nutty,
Yes.
Councilman Warner,
Yes.
Councilman Williams Jr.,
Yes.
Councilman Rob.
Yes.
Okay, thank you very much. And then item H, approval of pending ordinance 3678, is amended to the various salary ordinance to change the ordinance officer to full-time.
And I did make one correction. I had per hour, and I did correct it to per pay.
Oh, here?
Yes.
Yeah, I see it. Thank you.
This is to do what again?
Actually, I didn't do a public hearing on it.
No,
No, we advertised, that's right, okay.
no.
Under police
No,
department.
this is just modifying, amending the salary ordinance.
Right.
Because the ordinance officer was on here as an hourly rate. Now he'll be paid a salary.
Okay, we have a motion to approve ordinance 3678, amendment to the various salary ordinance.
So moved.
Have a motion?
Motion.
Have a second? Roll call vote?
Councilman Rob,
Yes.
Councilman Gray,
Yes.
Councilman Nutty,
Yes.
Councilman Warner,
Yes.
Councilman Williams Jr.
Yes.
Have a motion to suspend the rules.
So moved.
Second.
And a motion and a second. Roll call vote.
Councilman Rob,
Yes.
Councilman Gray,
Yes.
Councilman Nutty,
Yes.
Councilman Warner,
Yes.
Councilman Williams Jr.
Yes. And a motion for a third and final reading.
So moved.
Got it.
A motion and a second. Okay, roll call vote.
Councilman Gray,
Yes.
Councilman Nutty,
Yes.
Councilman Warner,
Yes.
Councilman Williams Jr.,
Yes.
Councilman Rob.
Yes.
Okay, thank you very much. Down to the department report. John. Multitasking.
I am. That's my wife.
Yep, you're good.
Last month, we had 11 hours, 25 minutes of meeting production, 12 hours, 40 minutes of original production, and of course, a great deal of that was the end of the school. We did a lot of production at the high school at the end, including the parade this year and things like that. Some of the things we've been working on, we have now done Science Isn't Scary out and about. So we're actually going out in the community and videotaping various things in the community. Some of those things are, the first one we did was Mary Gray bird banding, where they were banding birds and you could actually see the bird in her hand, and it was fascinating stuff. Then we did the veterinary clinic, and Dr. Kiefaber had a dog with a broken leg, and we got to see how they, found out that the leg was broken and how they, handle all kinds of interesting things like that. Next coming up, we've got 4-H sheep and pigs. We went out in the county, videotaped some sheep, which was, interesting and gross. And the pigs, which got loose and ran, that was fun. And we've now done a short segment at the wastewater treatment facility. That'll be coming up here soon. So that was really smelly, but very fascinating. Any questions?
You were on a pig farm, a sheep farm, and
I don't understand why we're choosing these things.
What did you do wrong, Jim?
I don't know.
okay, thank you, sir.
Thank you.
Chief Harden.
Good evening.
Good evening.
Everyone should have a copy of my report.
Yes.
We had 380 calls for the month of May. The one thing I did put on the very back page is a 6-year kind of a trending per month, because we have high months and low months, and they tend to historically be pretty regular. So our historic call numbers is 320, so we are 60 calls above what our average is over the last 6 years. So it was a fairly busy month. We still do have 2 vacancies, paramedic vacancies. I've got another meeting / interview with a possible person to fill one of those tomorrow, so I'm keeping my fingers crossed. We completed PHTLS, which was a 2-day course. We completed that in May. I know I talked about it before, but we did complete that in May. And we're starting to do some preparations for fair time, equipment upgrades, getting our supplies together. A lot of special event, a lot of coverage, a lot of people, a lot of area. So we try to have that stuff ready, as well as our displays and our information that we like to give out to the community. So, do we have any questions?
Where are you at on the flight process?
The one call?
Yes.
So I've been working with Kelly from Dispatch on a one-call proposal for medical helicopters. I presented it to the 911 board the other night because there's a representative from every agency on that board. I was given the approval to go ahead with this. They meet quarterly, so they didn't want to wait and hold it for, if I get it done, next week, hold it for 3 months. So they gave me a kind of what I see as a preliminary go ahead to go ahead and do this, and then I will take back my final results to them in 3 months. So it's basically it's pre-planned with staff light. We will call one number, and they will then make phone calls and find us the closest available helicopter. So it will take some off of dispatch. It also will help with if we need multiple aircraft. It is a big safety concern that if they don't know about each other. That's a big red flag. So because it's all going through a helicopter dispatch, they will make sure that everyone knows you've got 3 helicopters inbound, or you've got 2, or you've got, one's coming from the west and one's coming from the east. So it's a work in progress. I have not reached out to their base manager, but I want to talk to their base manager and also their comms, basically, they call it comms, it's what we would call dispatch. Their dispatch supervisor as well, and get our final touches, get the questions answered that were posed in the meeting, and then hopefully within a few weeks or a month to have that rolled out to everybody. So
I think it's a good move.
it'll be a time-saving move, and safety will improve because of it, and it will take the load off of dispatch. All right, thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks, Glenn.
Catherine.
Hi.
Good evening.
Instead of my regular report, I did a 6-month update on our goals that we submitted at the beginning of the year. Tried to color code it for you to show you what's been done and what we're working on next. Where we're going next is raising the match for 2nd Street Park. That's going to be a focus for the rest of this year, as well as completing the fundraising for Longwood Bridge. Have a really good start with that and have some ideas on how to finish it up. We also have some work to do on our trail system. That's going to be just completing some things on the extension, as well as the nickel plate. So unless you have other questions about that, I did kind of want to touch on the pool. I know there's been a lot of things on social media. It was discussed at the last meeting. I just wanted to kind of bring you up to date on how we work at the pool. We do have 3 managers. Contrary to social media, they are all adults. They are not teenagers. At all times, there's a manager on duty, and they are responding. Every single time there's an incident, it's been responded to. We are reacting the best we can, just as we should be doing, and the proper services, be it the police or EMS, are being contacted, and they're dealing with these situations. I did talk with Chief Bolos earlier today, and we are going to start a 0 tolerance policy at the pool. That means if your child is there or you are there and you're kind of asked to cut it out and you don't, you're going to be kicked out of the pool. We just can't continue on with giving people 2nd, 3rd, 4th chances anymore. After you're asked to leave, you will be, I guess you'll be on file with the police department as a trespasser. So if you do come back, the police will be called and you will be charged with trespassing. So that's the next step, unfortunately, where we have to go with the pool this year. So just kind of wanted to address those things. We're also going to be putting up windscreen on the chain link fence. That will prevent people from passing things through the fence or parking and looking into the pool and doing things you shouldn't be doing. So just wanted to answer any questions you guys might have, if any. Let you know that we are very much aware of it and we're doing everything we need to be doing.
I have a question. You're putting a windscreen around the pool?
No, just on the chain link fence. There's a chain link fence on the north side of the pool.
Yeah, but that doesn't give access to the police officers to drive by there and see what's going on.
Yeah, I've asked for them when they come and if they can park and take 5 minutes and walk the deck.
I don't know if that's going to be a possibility for them to do that. I understand the concern on that, but I would recommend not doing that because the police can drive by and at least their presence is seen, even if they can't get out of the car and walk the deck.
We've had complaints for years about people parking and looking in on swimmers. This year it seems to be a problem with items being passed through the fence. Might be a toss-up as to which is worse.
I feel that if they're there, if the police presence is there, the situation of them sitting there and being a voyeur or whatever you want to call it, it is less likely.
But the police aren't sitting
They're
there
not
24/7, so I mean, it's
No.
only one pass-by clearance, I mean,
I understand that, but the thing about it is if they can't see through there, they're not doing it.
right. Well, the
Driving
police are,
by's not doing
from what I
it.
understand, the police are all, I understand what you're saying, Clarence, but I also understand that the police are actually getting out, walking, like you said, on the, what'd you call it,
The deck.
the deck. Chad's also even walked the deck on occasions and stuff, so I think that's helping you out a little bit as far as that part goes.
I could see.
I hate to see it closed
It's
up.
obvious now that the drive-bys aren't cutting it. I mean, if the drive-bys and then being able to see in through the fence was cutting it, we wouldn't be having the issues we're having.
So you've
So
been
I
getting
think
the
the
drive-bys, is that?
I think the deterrent of the windscreen would outweigh
It's too bad it's
probably
coming back.
anyone being able to see in, but it's just my thoughts.
So you have had the drive-bys, is my question.
I don't sit there and watch for them, no, but I'm told that they do patrol the park.
That would be my only concern about a screen going up, is the visibility.
And windscreen isn't completely,
No,
you
but
know,
hinders
you're
a
not
lot of
completely
visibility.
unable to see through it, but
When you mentioned that during the Board of Works, I had that same concern. I thought, let me ponder that. I think that it's a hindrance to the officer, but I think overall, the benefit is greater than the hindrance to the officer.
I agree.
It's not the ideal thing, but it's the best that we can do under this situation, or you can do.
The problem of passing items through the fence is kind of new, at least to me. I never have had complaints. This is my third summer. I haven't not had complaints before. So it's kind of doing double duty. Every summer I've had complaints about people parking that are just watching swimmers, so.
Are you searching them on the way in? Like, what's the benefit to these folks? What, are you searching them on the way in? What's the benefit to these folks? To pass them through the
Searching
gate?
who?
Yeah, what are they passing through?
I've heard they pass pot through the fence.
But he can't
Again,
smoke
that-
it there.
That could just be gossip, but
So cameras up there?
no, that's something else that they're considering doing.
If you're, excuse me, if you're seriously planning on putting the screen up, from past experience, it needs to be wired up because zip ties won't hold it. And I would recommend you put it on the inside of the fence.
Yeah, it goes on the inside, but you actually have to zip tie it. That way it will break in a strong wind and it won't take the fence down.
Well,
But we can do,
if
what we
you
did
do-
at
if you do
the
zip
tennis
ties,
court was we put the wire on the top and the zip tie on the bottom.
I'll guarantee it's gonna come down with zip ties.
Okay. Thank you.
On a positive note, I saw that you had like a pretty sizable donation for the bridge. Is that contingent to anything? That's great.
It's an
You
honor.
glossed over that one. I'm like, why are you glossing over that? That's a big donation.
Yeah.
Is the cost to repair the Longwood Bridge still at quarter?
250.
250 was.
How much?
250.
250,000 was the estimates.
Is that just one estimate?
It's the estimate.
We've had it.
That's one.
Did the gentleman look at it and ever get back with you?
Yeah, we've been in
Yeah.
correspondence. He still hasn't sent me the itemized budget, but now that he knows we're for real,
That's good.
So you guys do have 3 adults working there at all times.
yes, sir.
So one is taking the money and the other one is in the kitchen with the other kids while they're cooking or whatever they're doing, and the other one is doing.
Well, there's always one manager on duty at all times. We have 3, because they can only work 35 hours a week.
Right.
So they have to split it up between regular hours and pool parties. Usually the manager is always floating. The manager never gets to sit down. They're either up front, they're in the guardhouse, they're in the concession stand, they're all over the place. That's the person in every instance of problem that we've had so far. Fortunately, it's come down on the same manager, but she has responded every single time, just how she should have.
Yep.
So.
I agree.
Okay, any other questions?
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks, Pat.
Chief Jones.
Good evening. Everybody should have a copy of my monthly report for May. We'll start off with the overtime. Overtime was about average for the month of May, a few sick days. So any questions over that? No. We'll move on to the run report. For the month of May, we had 156 runs. And below that, you'll see kind of a rundown of the different types of runs we had for the month. Next, we'll move on to the training. You can see a list of the training hours the guys had for May. We had a total of 56.5 hours of training. And then on the last page, you'll see a list of inspections that were done in May. That's all I have. Are there any questions? Nope. All right.
Thank you, sir. Thank you.
Thank you.
Brad. Mr. Coulter, over here.
Howdy. Howdy. A few things you see all the reports. I'll tell you a little bit about those here in just a minute. I wanted to remind everybody we've got the water main replacement project going on. They've got the water main installed up on 10th Street. They're getting ready to move to EB Drive. Maybe tomorrow, probably Wednesday, weather permitting. They're going to install the water main on EB Drive while the main is being tested on 10th Street. So then they'll go back there and hook the individual services up. I want to remind everybody about the yard waste pickup and the heavy trash item pickup. On Wednesday, we pick up yard waste. If you call in by Tuesday at noon and leave a message on the, if you call 825-1421, listen for the prompt for the yard waste and then leave a message. On the heavy trash item pickup is on Thursday, so you need to call by noon on Wednesday. I also wanted to mention that I know everybody was tickled with the downtown festival, how well that went. I want to give a little credit to all the city employees that worked hard to get ready for that. The Parks Department moved a lot of picnic tables and took trash. And those guys really worked hard, especially the guy that cleaned up on Saturday morning after it was over. And then the guys at the street department did all kinds of stuff, and they swept the lot by hand and with the sweeper. And I'm sure Mandy would say, if she was here, that there was a lot of good help from the city employees of all departments, police and everybody. So I just wanted to mention that. It takes a lot of people to put on something like that. Pretty big undertaking. Did anybody have any questions about any of the reports?
I have some questions, but not necessarily about a report. When the utilities is called out for trouble on the customer's property, and they find out that it's the customer's side of an issue, not the city's issue, do they get billed back for that, the customer?
On water, they do.
No.
On water, there's a charge. On waste, on the sewer side, we usually don't, because we need to be notified of those because it could be dangerous, you know, if sewage is running somewhere. But on water, there is a $60 charge. Can't remember what I think it's 60. Don't quote me. I can't tell you off the top of my head what it is. I'd have to look.
But there's a fee if they call you and come to find out it's their problem.
Yeah, and basically the fee just covers what we were paying somebody to come in and go check out that call.
That's the answer that I was asking.
Okay.
Brad, can you explain the hydrant leak on top of Third Street Hill a little bit, so everybody understands why it's still,
So the reason it started leaking is because the hydrant in that intersection has to be moved because the new ADA ramp is going in there. So when we went up to turn the valve off to move it, then the valve broke and the top of the valve broke out. So we had to, there was a lot of tie-ins and connections going on right there, and we've had to regroup twice now. We had one valve installed and that didn't shut it down. Friday and Monday both, I met with the water crew guys and Mike, and we've been working on a game plan. I believe we have it figured out.
and not only do you have to wait on the street depart, I mean, the highway department, because it's NDOT state, you have to wait on a different company to be able to do this,
Yeah.
replace these valves.
You have to coordinate with the company that comes in and puts a valve in, plus the NDOT has been helping us flag that area up there because it's so dangerous, narrow. So there's it takes a lot to get it done. I hope that we have figured out what it's gonna take to shut that down. That's a tricky one. There's just there's check valves that hold water up on the hill, and there's just a lot going on. I think we got it figured out. So one day this week, hopefully we'll have that fixed.
Forgot to ask that question, thank you. What was the leak over on the Eastern Avenue, old Hassler? Is that one of our problems?
Yeah, we've got a leak. We've got 4 or 5 service leaks, and we've been really struggling. We've been struggling to keep up because there's so many projects going on. The guys are spending half their time locating lines, going out and marking our lines for people that are doing different things. It's been a real battle. I think we might work this Saturday, work some overtime to try to get a couple of those knocked out.
Any other questions?
I would think that just the line locates due to other utilities work covers you guys up for a day, or not two.
They spend a half a day most days just locating. Some of them are remarks, for this downtown. But you just have to, when you have these ongoing projects, we just keep getting called back every 2 weeks to remark them. And it takes a lot of time.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Perry.
Good evening, Council.
Am I?
Right, in your packets, you should have got our reports. Overtime was down a little last month from the previous month. Our total law reports that we responded to was 1,124. 43 citations were issued. We did have 32 ordinance reports, and that's due to the new ordinance enforcer has come in and is really jumping on properties and doing the follow-up that needs done, and should see an improvement in that area. We got some new totals to give you this month. We got with our task force and got some numbers from them on the drugs and paraphernalia that they dealt with, and just to give you a few of those numbers. This month they were able to take off the streets of Connorsville 34.8 grams of meth, 7.8 grams of fentanyl, 42 different pills, several needles, done 1 search warrant, and we're able to arrest 3 just out of the task force alone. So we're staying busy in that area as well. We did have 126 training hours completed by officers in several different areas. Just a few more numbers for you and the public to know what's going on.
Those are good numbers.
Thanks, sir. Any questions?
Appreciate the information.
Oh, yeah.
I have, on the law reports,
Yes, sir.
does that include your building checks?
That does, yes, sir.
No, I take it they are still doing those, right?
Yes.
The possession and drug-related numbers you have down here, is that officer initiated, or is that from task force also?
Those are officer initiated, whether we get a call for an overdose, traffic stops, those sorts of numbers.
Okay, thanks.
Yes, sir.
Like this ordinance report.
hopefully he'll stay on top of that and we'll have good numbers for you. Thank you, council.
Thank you.
I would be okay if the ordinance officer wanted to just email that to us each month, or if you guys prefer it to be in your packet.
I like the display myself.
Okay.
Either one.
However you want it, we'll work it out for you. If you want to email that Diana, we can email.
Gives you a better list of things.
I wouldn't want to see him have to pick and choose between 7 of us, just do it all one or the other.
Makes it easier.
Yeah.
Okay, moving on to old business. Is there any old business? Miscellaneous business.
I have some things from my one advisory board. They're going, for the people that don't know, they're going to put the dispatch door in around 3 weeks. That's going to be $1,600. They tried to repair the old one, and it ended up being like $2,000 to repair it. So the option was to
It'll make
replace
it more secure.
Right. And it's going to be replaced by the company that did the key fobs.
He'll find.
Yeah, thank you. And then they're throwing around the idea of a new console, because the old console they have is obsolete. And the companies that repair those say they don't make parts for them anymore. And if you can find parts for them, it's going to be on eBay or someplace like that. So, if you can find them. So they got an estimate to replace it, and it was $160,420 and change, 20 cents. I know the counties opted to spend their money on the jail. And they're hoping that this communications center holds up. So I don't know that I would put money on that horse, but
Do you know how old that console is? Is it of original, or has it been upgraded in
it's been
time?
upgraded, but that was back probably 10 or 15 years ago. I don't have that number exactly, but I know they've always done improvements on it. They've had to replace computers in the bottom of it several times prior to this director's term. They've had to delete some things so they can put some new things in it. So it's been kind of patched for a number of years.
15 years is a long time for electronics.
Yeah. Well, they're saying that what we have now is outdated, so, and we can't get parts. So if we don't plan on doing something soon, our communications center to all of our services is going to be sketchy at best. I also had a complaint from a gentleman that owns a property next to 1915 Vermont. I guess they've started a business up there in the back of that house. Kind of a scrap business. They're bringing in cars and dismantling them, and I don't know whether just selling parts off of them or not.
I think it's one on the list here. You can see it from the church parking lot, and we actually went over and touched base with them once, so.
Yeah.
Might let Bill Duane on that as well, if they're out there.
Yeah, I'll let
legal
them
business.
know.
But they, I guess the ordinance enforcer, the place has been up there. That's what we were talking about last meeting. And I've since been told that when it rains, you can get a lot of fumes from the gas that they're dumping in the ground up there. And I meant to ask Brad about a storm sewer location up there, and I forgot to do that.
You said 1915
1925.
25.
It's the neighbor to 1925, correct?
I think it's 1925.
Oh, okay.
They put millings back there all the way up into their yard, almost to the door. So that they could have a driveway, complete parking lot in the backyard.
I'll have Nick get with Bill.
That's all I have.
Any other miscellaneous business? Dave brought it to our attention, make sure everyone knows that the next council meeting is the 6th. And the
Tuesday,
Board of Works is the 6th.
on Tuesday.
So don't forget that. If you show up Monday, you'll be by yourself.
The doors will be locked.
Only reason I know that, because I've done that before. So, is there anyone from the public out there, Clint? Okay, move on for adjournment.
So moved.
On motion second, roll call vote.
Councilman Nettie?
Yes.
Councilman Warner?
Yes.
Councilman Williams Jr.?
Yes.
Councilman Robb?
Yes.
Councilman Gray?
Thank you, have a wonderful day.